Hey, so I haven't done anything like this in a really long time, but I woke up this morning and this passage or story popped into my head, and I thought that I would do a live on this because I haven't done one in forever. So we're in Acts 12, 1 through 17, and I'm just going to start reading it, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it after. So, about that time, King Herod Agrippa began to persecute some believers in the church. He had the apostles James, John's brother, killed with a sword. When Herod saw how much this pleased the Jewish leaders, he arrested Peter during the Passover celebration and imprisoned him, placing him under the guards of 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod's intention was to bring Peter out for public trial after the Passover, but while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. Okay. The night before Peter was to be placed on trial, he was asleep, chained between 2 soldiers. I just woke up. Chained between 2 soldiers with others standing guard at the prison gate. Suddenly there was a bright light in the cell, and an angel of the Lord stood before Peter. The angel tapped him on the side to awaken him and said, "Quick, get up," and the chains fell off his wrists. Then the angel told him, "Get dressed and put on your sandals." And he did. "Now put on your coat and follow me," the angel ordered. So Peter left the cell, following the angel, but all the time he thought it was a vision. He didn't realize it was really happening. They passed the first and second guard posts and came to the iron gate to the street, and this opened to them all by itself. So they passed through and started walking down the street. And then the angel suddenly left him. Peter finally realized that what happened. It's really true, he said to himself. The Lord has sent his angel and saved me from Herod and from the Jews and from what the Jews were hoping to do to me. After a little thought, he went to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many had gathered for prayer. He knocked at the door in the gate, and a servant girl named Rhoda, I think it's Rhoda, came to open it. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the door, she ran back and told everyone, "Peter is standing at the door." "You're out of your mind," they said. When she insisted, they decided it must be his angel. Meanwhile, Peter continued knocking. When they finally went out and opened the door, they were amazed. He motioned for them to quiet down and told them what had happened and how the Lord had led him out of jail. "Tell James and the other brothers what happened," he said, and then he went to another place. So James, the brother of John, is the one that was killed. The brother James that he is talking about is the brother of Jesus. I have heard this story told so many times, and every time I hear it told, people say that the church didn't have faith. And I always find it really interesting that people think that the church didn't have faith because they were, and it says in 5, but while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. You can't pray very earnest prayers without faith. And I get that it sounds like they didn't have faith because they were so shocked that Peter was at the door. But I think in this instance, it's not that they didn't have, I don't think it's that they didn't have faith. I think that it's they didn't expect for God to do it the way that he did it. I think a lot of times that we pray prayers that are very earnest and full of faith. And, it's not that we didn't expect for God to actually answer us. It's that we didn't expect for God to answer us the way he does. I know for myself, there's been a lot of times where I've prayed very earnest prayers. And I was really, truly believing that God was going to do something. And then God did, but it wasn't how I expected him to do it. And so, because it wasn't how I expected God to do it, I didn't see it as God at first. And then I realized later on, that was what I was praying for the whole time. It just didn't come the way I expected it. And because it didn't come the way I expected it, I didn't see that God was behind it. There's a lot of times where we're praying for things like this church, and we're praying very honestly, and then it happens. But it happens in such an amazing way that we're like, this didn't really happen. And it's funny to me because this passage, every time I've ever heard it preached, it's about how the church didn't have faith, and Peter was sleeping. It's always the big thing, is that the angel had to smack him to wake him up. But I feel like there is faith. The fact that Peter could sleep means that he had faith that God was going to do something. Like, he was so content with God that even if God didn't do something, he was set, because his faith in God was so solid that he could sleep. Whether he lived or whether he died, he could sleep because he really truly trusted in God and believed in Jesus as the Christ. And he was at peace whether he lived or died. The church really truly was praying earnestly, which means that they had faith in God, that God would do something. They probably just didn't expect it to happen like it did. I know if I was praying like this in their shoes, I might expect for suddenly Herod Agrippa to release him suddenly, or for something else to happen. But for Peter to just suddenly be walked out of prison by an angel and then to show up on my doorstep, I might not necessarily be expecting that. So these are just my thoughts on this passage, and I could be wrong, because what do I know? But I also wanted to post on here because I do my daily Bible study. I post on my Instagram, Carissa the Cosmetologist. And I started doing that because I realized while going to church, not at the church that I'm at or the church that I was at, but many years ago, while talking to some youth from the church that I was in, that so many people have, one, never read the Bible, and two, have no idea what's in the Bible. And so I started reading the Bible myself. For the first time, I read the Bible all the way through when I was 27. I had read, as a teenager, different parts of the Bible. Like, I read Ruth and I read Esther because I wanted to read about the women of the Bible that had their own books. And then I also read through Proverbs, and if you've never read through Proverbs, I highly recommend it because there's so much wisdom in Proverbs, and that's why I read through it as a teenager, because I wanted to be wise even as a teenager, and I wasn't. And I don't think as a teenager you really understand how much you don't know until you're not a teenager anymore. But I read through I read through Proverbs, but it wasn't until I was 27 that I was like, I've never read the entire Bible. I went through and I read the entire Bible and realized how little I knew and how much more sense the Bible and the New Testament, like the Old Testament makes the New Testament make so much more sense when you've read the whole thing. Especially all those begots. If you've ever read the Bible, you know that there's he begot, he begot, he begot, he begot in Matthew. And you're like, why does this matter? If you read the Old Testament, you see why it matters and how much more sense the Bible makes and how much the Bible connects all over the place to itself, how much foreshadowing of Jesus there is in the Old Testament to the New. And so I started posting my Bible study Instagram pictures with my thoughts on them because I realized how little young people actually know, and how much not even just young people are missing out on, but even older people. I actually heard this passage preached not that long ago, and when I heard it preached, the person preaching it said that James that was killed in this passage was Jesus's brother, but it was John's brother, not Jesus's brother. But it's one of those things that, like, unless you have read the Bible, and you're lucky, like I have been lucky to have people that know more than you about the Bible, and you can go and kind of pick their brain about it, you really don't know what everything is talking about. Like, there's just so much that you don't understand, and that's fine, because same, I read the Bible all the time, and like I got tripped up on Rhoda's name. My kids love listening to me read the Begots because I can't pronounce half the people's names in the Bible. But I started doing my Bible studies as just a way to kind of help other people like me that had no idea what was going on in the Bible, because we just didn't fully invest. And I really have enjoyed reading the Bible with my kids. We're reading through the Old Testament. I believe we read through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I don't know if we ended up finishing John. I think we might have. And maybe Acts. I'm not sure about that. But we started reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and I realized this will make sense to my kids more if we read through the Old Testament and then go into the New. So they have some New Testament knowledge. Now we're reading through the Old Testament. We're in Exodus, and there's so often where we go into church and we'll be listening to a pastor preach on something that we literally just read in the Bible. We went to a youth group a little while ago, and they were preaching on Genesis and Exodus, kind of, and what happens in them. And my kids and I were looking at each other like, hey, we just read the story. And so it's one of those things where, like, it is awesome to read the Bible with my kids and have them see certain things. But I would like to get on and do more of these lives where I just read the Bible. I really had intended to do lives where I read the Bible, Matthew through Revelations. Even though I have very little understanding of Revelations, I never pretend like I understand what's going on there. But I just wanted to actually get on and read the Bible with people, and that was my intention, to just read it, not to really necessarily always give my opinion, because sometimes the word speaks for itself. You don't have to give an opinion. But I would like to start doing that. I'm in Matthew, so if I start doing this, I'll probably just pick up in Matthew where I'm at and just have anyone who's interested follow along in Matthew with me. But yeah, I haven't done one of these in a really long time. They're never super elegant. They're always very basic because, like I said, what do I know? The only things that I know I've learned from other people who know way more than me. But I think sometimes we go to church and we're too embarrassed to ask a pastor or maybe another Christian, like, hey, what does this mean? And sometimes it helps to have somebody who doesn't know everything read the Bible with you or go through the Bible with you. I have a lot more knowledge than I think I do because of the way that I grew up as a preacher's daughter, and because I have a dad who has a doctorate in Christian studies, essentially. I don't want to say religion because that always sounds awful. But, I mean, I literally have two parents that went to Bible college, and then I have my youngest brother who is an ordained minister also and it pastors, and then my other brother who is just very self-taught and knows so much. Well, really, both of my brothers are very much in some ways self-taught, but like they have so much knowledge in the Word and in the Bible and in history and stuff like that that I just don't have. I love picking their brain. And then my sister is very, very smart. She can tell you all the names of the Bible, the Torah, the Pentateuch, and the one that I can never remember, because she spent a lot of time teaching her kids when they were young and watching shows with them that were Bible-based and oriented. And so, like, all of my family members have a lot of knowledge in the Bible and in the Word. And I feel like my non-elegant approach is maybe an approach that a lot of people would be willing to go with me on, just because sometimes it's hard to follow along with someone who is coming at this from the perspective of like, I have so much knowledge that they can't just read it to you. I love people who know so much, and when I'm reading through the Bible, they are the ones that I go to and I'm like, I don't get this, please help me understand. But sometimes you don't need all the explanations of all the really complicated parts of the Bible. Sometimes you just need to read it first, and then you can go and ask all the complicated questions. But I've realized in speaking to people how many people have just never ever read it. And I feel like that's a great place to start, is just reading it. And so today I just got on here and read Acts 12, 1 through 17, just for the sake of like starting somewhere, because if I don't start somewhere, I'll probably never start. And I might take this video down, or I might leave it up. I have no idea, honestly. But I hopefully will continue to do this while I'm home and have the time to read the Bible with you guys. And yeah, that's all. But anyways, thanks if you did get on and watch this, and if you didn't, like, and you're watching this later, leave me your thoughts.